You will not believe how the streets of Rome glitter, not with gold, but with the dull coppery shine of countless tiny coins. If you bend down, you will see them scattered across the paving stones, half hidden in the cracks, as though the city itself is constantly shedding its smallest change. The Roman Empire is vast and mighty and filled with unimaginable wealth. But for some reason, the people here cannot stop fussing over coins that are barely worth the sweat it takes to carry them. But before we begin tonight's story, if you enjoy these calm history stories, please like the video and subscribe. Let us know in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is for you right now. Your comments means a lot to us. They help us to keep the work on. Your kind words are the biggest support we can get. Now, dim the lights and let's go back in time together. You stand on a bustling Roman street. Vendors are shouting, donkeys are braying. The smell of fresh bread drifts through the warm air. The baker, sleeves rolled up, hands you a small round loaf. You reach into your pouch, not for one coin, but for 5 or 6 of the tiniest bronze discs you have ever seen. Each one is about the size of your fingernail. You hand them over carefully, because if one slips through your fingers, it might vanish into the dust forever. Already, you can feel the peculiarity of Roman life. For a civilization that loved grand displays of power, arches, amphitheaters, aqueducts, they were astonishingly fixated on money that jingled more than it was worth. The smallest coin of all was the quadrans, just a quarter of the humble as. A coin so tiny it could barely buy a mouthful of cheap wine. Yet these coins were struck by the millions, and they flowed endlessly through the hands of citizens, slaves, and children. Now, you might laugh, because in your own world, people already complain about carrying too many coins. You have probably shoved a handful of pennies into a jar, swearing never to carry them again. But in Rome, the obsession with the smallest coins is no mere inconvenience. It is a cultural trait. The Roman people expected them, demanded them, and often measured daily life by them. One mainstream fact is this: Roman wages and prices were calculated in units that made sense only if you had these small coins. A day's pay for an unskilled worker might be a few asses, each divided again and again into tinier fractions. Without quadrants jingling in your purse, you could not pay the bathhouse fee, the bakery, or the vegetable seller. In a sense, Rome functioned because its smallest coins existed in such abundance. And here is a curious side note. Some public baths in Rome demanded entrance fees of exactly 1 quadrans. Imagine the scene. Hundreds of Romans, each paying a single tiny coin just to step into the steam. The clinking sound of bronze must have echoed like a strange percussion orchestra in the tiled vestibules. If you did not have a quadrans, you might be out of luck, standing outside while others went in to wash away the dust of the city. Historians still argue whether the obsession with minuscule coins was a practical necessity or a psychological comfort. Did Romans truly need them for transactions, or did they cling to them out of tradition, habit, or even superstition? After all, even emperors issued quadrantes with their faces proudly stamped upon them, as if to remind citizens that the ruler himself endorsed the tiniest details of their daily economy. As you wander further, you see children playing a game. They flip little bronze coins into a line scratched into the dirt, trying to land them just right. The coins catch the sunlight and glimmer faintly, like dull stars. For the children, this is more than play. It is practice for the adult world, where every loaf, every bath, every measure of oil is tied to a clinking chorus of bronze. Your pouch is already heavy. You feel the weight pulling at your belt. Dozens of coins pressing against each other, heating in the sun. Imagine carrying your wallet today if it was filled entirely with pennies, each one absolutely necessary for survival. That is your Roman reality. There are no crisp banknotes to simplify matters, no plastic cards to swipe with a flick. Just coin after coin after coin. One baker's apprentice runs past you, purse rattling like a sack of stones. You cannot help but chuckle. That sound is the music of Roman life, though it is also the complaint of Roman life. People are constantly juggling small coins, counting them, losing them, weighing them. Every transaction is a minor ceremony of arithmetic and patience. And yet, the more you listen, the more you notice something else. Romans take pride in their tiny coins. They laugh about them. They tell stories about them. They even use them in metaphors. A man might say, "You are not worth a quadrans," meaning you are utterly useless. It is an insult wrapped in the smallest denomination of value. The strange truth is that these coins do more than buy bread or baths. They bind society together. They are a shared rhythm, a shared annoyance, a shared necessity. Rome thrives on spectacle and conquest, but it ticks forward day after day on the clink of the smallest change. You pause by a fountain, dropping a coin into the water. It is a quadrans, worthless and yet strangely symbolic. People before you have done the same, offering tiny coins to the spirits of fountains, crossroads, and shrines. Even the gods, it seems, are not above accepting very small change. So here you stand, your purse heavy, your hand already aching, realizing that the peculiar Roman obsession is no passing quirk. It is the heartbeat of their daily lives. And as you shuffle onward through the crowded streets, stepping over yet another lost coin glinting in the dust, you begin to sense just how deep this obsession will carry you. You press forward through the city, and soon you notice something even stranger than the coins themselves. It is not simply that there are so many tiny bronzes in circulation. It is that Romans measure their fortunes by stacking these little discs into mountains. A man doesn't always boast of gold or even of silver. Instead, he drags out a heavy chest, lifts the lid, and lets thousands of copper coins spill across a table like a farmer pouring out grain. The sight is impressive, not because of the value, but because of the sheer volume. Wealth, to Roman eyes, is often a sound and a spectacle. The rattle of bronze, the glint of piled-up change, the sheer absurdity of needing both hands just to lift a day's profit. You probably will not survive this economy if you are in a hurry. Imagine trying to buy a second-hand tunic, and instead of handing over a few tidy coins, you spend half an hour counting out copper like raindrops. The seller nods, half amused, half irritated. By the time the final coin clinks into place, you're both tired enough to nap right there in the street. Now, here is one mainstream fact. Wealthy Romans often kept their small coins in sealed bags, carefully weighed so they would not have to count them each time. Instead of saying, "I will give you 200 asses," they might slap down a pouch, trusting the scales. And yet, even then, the obsession with exactness made them reweigh, double-check, and sometimes argue anyway. Curiously, this habit of weighing money meant that bankers in Rome, the Argentari, developed astonishing skill at judging coins. They could tell, by ear, if a bronze coin was shaved, clipped, or counterfeit. A single ring, a single dull thud, would give away a fraud. It is no wonder that the money changers' stalls buzzed constantly with the clatter of coins being tested and retested. And still, historians argue about this practice. Was it efficiency, a way to avoid endless counting? Or was it paranoia, born from mistrust of the people minting the coins? After all, even emperors were suspected of tampering with the weight of money. And if the ruler himself bent the rules, what chance did ordinary Romans have of trusting the system? Picture a merchant at Ostia, Rome's bustling port. He has just sold a load of grain. His reward? Not sleek silver, but 3 baskets of copper change. The dock workers grunt and stagger as they haul the payment onto his cart. He sighs, half rich, half crushed by inconvenience. It is wealth, but it feels like ballast. Here is your lighter note for the evening. Romans sometimes joked that a truly wealthy man needed strong slaves not to guard his treasures, but just to carry them. Forget armored guards with spears. The real security risk was a broken back from lugging sacks of coppers across town. And of course, every pile of coins demanded organization. Romans loved their tallies, their tablets, their scratches on wax. You can almost hear the scratching stylus as shopkeepers record 400 asses owed, 300 asses received. The math is constant, the calculations endless. Rome is not just the empire of roads and legions. It is the empire of bookkeepers, forever squinting at lists of small numbers. Think of the irony. This same society that carved marble triumphs to celebrate victory over nations was equally proud of counting pennies with exactness. The grand and the petty lived side by side. An emperor might ride through Rome in a gilded chariot, and then, in the privacy of the palace, argue with the steward about whether last month's figs were overpaid by 3 quadrantes. You walk past a money changer's stall, and there it is. A sound that defines Rome. Not music, not birdsong, but the constant metallic rain of coins poured, counted, shuffled, weighed. It is hypnotic, a lullaby of clink and chime, almost enough to put you to sleep. And yet, there is also anxiety beneath it. You can feel it in the air. What if you miscount? What if you lose track? One missing coin could mean you cannot pay for the bathhouse, or the wine, or the baker. And in a society that loves exactness, being 1 quadrant short is no small embarrassment. It makes you wonder, were Romans more obsessed with the coins themselves or with the order they represented? Was the mountain of change a kind of comfort? A visible, noisy, weighty proof that you were in control of your life? As you think this, a cart rumbles past. The driver curses because one of the sacks on the back bursts open. Hundreds of tiny bronze coins scatter across the street. Children dive like sparrows. Adults stop to watch. The driver leaps down, but the damage is done. There is no way to pick them all up. The coins glitter in the dust, half treasure, half nuisance, and you smile because you realize, in Rome, a mountain of change can vanish into dust in the blink of an eye. You drift now into the Subura, Rome's busiest, noisiest, and perhaps most chaotic neighborhood. The streets are narrow here, laundry drips from balconies. The air was heavy with the smell of cooking oil, cheap perfume, and the faint tang of smoke. Everywhere around you, the obsession with small coins beats like a drum. You hear it before you see it. A constant rattling, like 1,000 tambourines playing out of sync. That is not music. It is purses stuffed with tiny bronzes, slapped against palms, shaken in fists, spilled across wooden counters. The Subura is the belly of Rome. Here, fortunes are not measured in gold, but in the speed of exchange. And speed, of course, means having the right small coin at hand. A vegetable seller thrusts a bundle of leeks toward you. His other hand jingles a little leather pouch. You give him 3 asses, he gives you a quadrans back. The rhythm is precise, the ritual well practiced. It is almost like a handshake. Bronze coins changing hands instead of words. Now, here is your first solid fact of this section. The Subura was home to thousands of shops and stalls, stacked one after another, crammed into ground floors of apartment blocks, and every single one of them depended on the small change of Rome. Without copper coins, the economy of the Subura would grind to a halt. No stew, no wine, no cloth, no sandals. You would simply stand in line, empty-handed, waiting for someone to break your larger coin. And here is a curious side note. Shopkeepers sometimes carried their coins in ceramic jars. Imagine reaching behind a counter, not for a cash drawer, but for a little pot clinking with bronze. When the pot was full, the sound it made was a kind of shopkeeper's symphony. A promise that business was good, that customers were paying, and that dinner tonight would not be bread alone. Historians still argue, however, about just how common barter remained even here in the heart of Rome. Did the Subura truly run on coins alone, or did neighbors trade goods quietly when purses grew too light? There are hints, but no certainty. Perhaps the clatter of coins was only one layer of a more complicated system. Still, you cannot escape the noise. A fishmonger yells over the heads of the crowd. He rattles his purse as he shouts, as if proving that his catch is worth every bronze. A cobbler bangs a sandal down on his bench, and the payment he demands is not lofty, but a handful of tiny change. And yes, you notice something else. People here treat the purses almost like instruments. The rattle is half communication, half intimidation. A rich man shakes his coins like a warning. A poor man jingles his few pieces as though begging them to multiply. There is a joke whispered through the crowd. If you cannot sing, at least you can rattle your purse. And tonight, the Subura sounds like a great chorus of untrained singers, all jingling, clinking, chattering together. Now, look at this. A boy no older than 10 runs up to you with a tray of roasted chickpeas. He is quick, he is loud, he is relentless. "2 quadrantes," he shouts. He does not even look at your face. His eyes are fixed on your hand, waiting for the bronze. You give him the coins. He beams. And then, without missing a beat, he spins around and rattles his tray at the next passerby. For him, the tiny coins are life itself. Not toys, not games, but survival. And here, in the Subura, you realize how Roman identity is tied to this ritual. The baker, the butcher, the barber, they all live by the same rhythm. Coins chime, coins shift, coins bind the day together. But it is not without problems. You spot 2 men quarreling at a wine stall. One insists he gave the right change. The other swears he was cheated of a quadrans. Their voices rise. Fists clench. Other customers gather, leaning in eagerly, half hoping for a fight. And you see it clearly. A civilization obsessed with order, laws, and balance can still unravel over a coin smaller than your fingernail. This is the paradox of Rome. The Colosseum soars above you. Arches glimmer in the sunlight. Emperors declare wars and treaties. And yet, down here in the Subura, everything turns on whether a vendor gave back the right number of quadrants. As you step away from the noise, purse heavier than ever, you catch the smell of fresh bread again. A boy races past, pouch rattling, coins ringing like tiny bells. And you smile. For better or worse, in the Subura, life is not measured in victories or statues. It is measured in how many tiny coins fit into the palm of your hand. You follow the sound of marching feet. The Subura fades behind you, and soon you are standing on the edge of a training ground. Dust rises. Shields clash. The air smells of leather, sweat, and iron. And here, too, the Roman obsession with tiny coins follows you. Because soldiers, the very backbone of the empire, are paid in change so small it almost feels like a joke. Picture this. A line of legionaries waits in the midday sun. Each man carries his kit, his sword, his armor. And when payday comes, he also receives a heavy sack of bronze. You expect silver denarii, shining rewards for long marches and bloody battles. Instead, the clerk opens a chest, weighs out a bundle of coppers, and drops them into each soldier's hands. Clink, clink, clink. The sound rings out like rain on a tin roof. The men look at each other. No one cheers. No one smiles. Because they all know the coins will vanish quickly into bread, wine, and gear repairs. Their wages may be the pride of Rome, but the form they take is far from glorious. Here is your solid historical fact. An ordinary soldier might earn 900 sesterces a year. It sounds like a fortune on paper. But after deductions for food, equipment, and clothing, the amount left in his pouch was often pitiful. And much of it was not in silver, but in endless trickles of bronze. Now here is your curious side note. On some paydays, soldiers grew so annoyed at the mountain of change that they tossed their smallest coins into ditches or used them as gaming pieces in camp. Imagine throwing away your paycheck simply because it jingled too much. And yet, historians still argue whether this was a deliberate strategy by Rome. Did commanders pay soldiers in small coins to keep them spending locally, anchored to camp markets? Or was it merely the side effect of an economy drowning in bronze? The debate lingers. As you stand in the heat, you notice how heavy those purses are. A soldier adjusts his belt, grunting at the weight. Another shakes his head. Marching with Caesar is easier than marching with this pay, he mutters, to a ripple of laughter. There is even a grim kind of comedy in it. Imagine a hardened veteran who has faced spears and arrows without flinching, now cursing at the clatter of his own wages, bravery in battle, and irritation at pocket money. That is the Roman army in a nutshell. But here is the thing. Even these tiny coins mattered deeply. A legionary might spend a quadrans for oil to polish his armor, another for a turnip from a camp vendor, another for a dice game after drills. The empire fed on these little exchanges. Every camp, every fort buzzed with the low chime of coins as soldiers turned their pay back into the life of the camp. And when soldiers returned home, they carried with them not just memories of war, but habits of counting, juggling, and paying with bronze. The army, in its own way, spread the obsession to the farthest corners of the empire. Listen closely now. The clatter of swords fades, and you hear something softer. At the edge of the camp, two soldiers squat over a little wooden board, flipping quadrants into carved grooves. It is a game, half luck, half skill. Coins tumble, bounce, and roll. The men laugh, forgetting for a moment how small their wages truly are. And you feel the paradox again. These little bronzes, annoying, heavy, almost worthless, are at the same time the glue that binds the army together. Think of it this way. Rome conquered nations, raised walls, built cities. And yet the soldier, the man holding the empire on his shoulders, spent his days rattling with the sound of pocket change. The dust swirls around you. The camp is alive with shouts, the sharp smell of vinegar from canteens, the tang of sweat on armor straps. And still, underneath it all, you hear the same sound you heard in the Subura. That same clink, that same rattle, that same endless chorus of very small coins. The camp dust fades behind you. Now you walk uphill, toward the gleaming marble front of a temple. The air changes here. Incense drifts on the breeze, soft and sweet. Torches flicker. Priests in white robes move slowly across the steps. And yet, listen closely. There it is again. The sound of coins, not grand offerings of gold bars, not silver ingots stacked in piles, but a steady drizzle of small bronzes tossed into bowls, dropped into jars, clinking against marble. Even the gods, it seems, are content to be paid in pocket change. A woman kneels at the altar, eyes shut tight. She presses a tiny quadrans to her lips and sets it gently in a basket. It is nothing in value. It would barely buy a crust of bread. And yet, it feels enormous to her. A link between her prayers and the divine. Here is your firm historical fact. Roman temples collected huge sums of coin, but the majority of offerings were not large or precious. They were tiny, given in volume, not in weight. The gods did not demand a gold bar from every citizen. They wanted a steady river of little bronzes flowing into their coffers. And here is your curious side note. Archaeologists often find hoards of coins hidden inside temple floors. Not grand treasures, but caches of small change, swept up, stored, and forgotten. It seems the gods themselves were drowning in pennies. Still, historians argue about why the Romans clung so fiercely to these small temple offerings. Was it a true belief that the gods heard every clink? Or was it more social, a way to be seen giving no matter how little you had? The debate lingers, like incense smoke that never quite clears. Now the temple bell tolls. A priest steps forward with a bronze bowl. It is heavy. He groans softly as he sets it on the altar. The coins inside ring out like water in a basin. You imagine the divine beings of Olympus looking down, ears ringing with the endless jingle of humanity's spare change. But temples were only part of the story. The state, too, wanted its share. And Rome's tax collectors, the publicani, were just as obsessed with the little coins. Picture a taxpayer in a dusty provincial town. He owes a sum, not in neat round numbers, but in exact units. So he drags a sack of bronzes to the office. The clerk empties it onto the counter and begins to count. 1, 2, 3. By the time he reaches 500, his eyes are half shut. The taxpayer sighs. The clerk scratches on his wax tablet, and both men pray silently that the next citizen brings larger change. Now, think about your own world. Have you ever stood in line behind someone paying for groceries with a bag of coins? The tapping of feet, the rolling of eyes, the poor cashier's forced smile? Multiply that irritation by thousands, and you begin to understand the Roman tax system. And of course, tax collectors had to hold the money back to Rome. Caravans loaded with sacks of tiny bronzes trudged across roads and bridges, groaning under the weight. Taxes were not just numbers. They were actual physical burdens, measured in backache and mule sweat. There is even a faint trace of humor in this. Imagine the emperor himself, sitting on a golden throne, waiting for tribute from the provinces. Instead of shimmering bars of treasure, a line of weary tax collectors arrives, each dumping piles of jingling copper at his feet. The ruler of the world, surrounded by what amounts to mountains of pocket change. And yet, this is Rome's genius. The empire runs not on fantasy, but on practical systems. And practical systems require small steps. Tiny coins, tiny offerings, tiny taxes, multiplied by millions. That is how Rome pays its soldiers, feeds its cities, and builds its roads. As you leave the temple steps, you notice children again. They crouch by a fountain, flipping quadrants into the water. Some are making wishes. Some are fishing them back out with sticks. The splash, the laughter, the chime. It is almost musical. It softens the hard edges of taxes and offerings. For the children, the little coins are neither sacred nor bureaucratic. They are toys, bright and heavy enough to feel like treasure. And maybe, just maybe, That is part of the reason the obsession endured. Because in every hand, whether priest, clerk, or child, the coin carried meaning, even when its value was laughably small. The sun sets behind the temple roof. The smoke of incense curls upward. The bowls and jars are full, and the night begins with the faint, constant clink of tiny bronzes offered to gods and emperors alike. The morning air smells of bread baking. You step into the forum market, where sunlight spills across the paving stones. Birds flutter down to peck at crumbs between the stalls. And everywhere, the sound is the same. Coins, small coins, clinking and rattling like a restless stream. Here, the Roman obsession with tiny change comes to life in full chaos. Merchants call out their prices. A fishmonger yells for 2 asses. A baker insists on 1 semis more. And customers argue back, their voices rising above the clatter. This is not the lofty language of politics. This is not marble temples and solemn offerings. This is sharp, everyday squabbling about who owes what, and whether a quadrans is really worth the scratch on its surface. You can almost smile at the scene. Picture 2 men standing nose to nose, gesturing furiously. One claims the butcher shorted him on sausage. The other waves a little coin in the air, swearing it is genuine bronze. They jab fingers, they raise their voices, and finally, they both turn to the money changer's stall. A bored clerk sighs, weighs the coin on his tiny scales, and declares the matter settled. This is your clear historical fact. Markets in Rome and its provinces functioned on exact change. There was no rounding up, no keep the penny. If a head of lettuce cost 1 semis, then by Jupiter, that is the precise coin you needed. Now here is the curious side note. Money changers often carried small files with them. Why? Because customers sometimes shaved coins, scraping away slivers of metal. A single coin might look normal, but weighed a fraction less than it should. So, in the middle of buying cheese, a customer could be accused of fraud. The market was less Whole Foods, more detective novel. And still, historians argue about something deeper. Was the Roman obsession with small coins a mark of clever economic design? A society built on microtransactions? Or was it a flaw, a clumsy system that forced constant quarrels? The debate is alive even today, buzzing like the bees above a market fountain. You look around, and the modern comparisons come easily. Have you ever stood in a corner shop while someone digs in their pocket for exact change? That shuffling of coins, the awkward silence, the cashier's patient nod. Now stretch that small irritation into an entire empire. That was daily life in Rome. A little boy runs past your legs. He has stolen a fig from a stall, and the vendor chases him shouting. But instead of punishment, the boy drops a quadrans on the counter, and the man lets him go. The smallest coin in circulation, yet enough to change a chase into a bargain. A dog lies under a cart, panting in the noonday heat. Its ears twitch at the sound of coins falling, bouncing, clinking like a kind of music. And you wonder, perhaps the sound was so constant that even animals grew used to it, just as pigeons grow used to traffic in your own world. Evenings are no quieter. Torches flare, the breeze cools, and quarrels shift to taverns. Men lean across sticky tables, slamming down small bronzes for cups of sour wine. Voices rise, hands wave. Arguments about politics fade quickly, but quarrels about coins can last all night. You feel a strange drowsiness creep in here. The rhythm of the quarrels is almost lulling. The constant chime of small bronze becomes a background hum. Like cicadas in summer grass, it is irritating in detail, but soothing as a whole. And so, the market shows you something no temple or tax office could. It shows you the raw, unpolished truth. Rome was not only marble and conquest, it was daily life. It was petty squabbles over lettuce and sausage, children dropping quadrantes like toys, and citizens clutching their handfuls of bronze like lifelines. The air cools, the last stalls close, and the coins are swept into jars. Another day in Rome, measured not by hours or suns, but by the endless sound of tiny bronzes changing hands. You walk slowly, the sun already low in the sky. The marble of the temple glows honey gold, its steps cool beneath your feet. The air is filled with incense, sweet and heavy, and somewhere in the shadows a dove coos softly. Coins jingle in your hand. Not heavy, not grand, just the tiniest bronzes, quadrans, semises, asses, little round offerings that feel almost weightless. Inside the temple, the air is hushed. The smell of wax and burning oil wraps around you like a blanket. You see Romans stepping forward one by one, dropping their smallest coins into bowls and basins. The sound is delicate, a rain of bronze upon bronze. This is the historical fact. Temples did not rely on gold alone. Far more often, they were funded by countless small offerings. One coin from a baker, another from a shepherd, a third from a child. Thousands of tiny gifts became the lifeblood of the gods. It is almost charming, almost absurd. Imagine a god like Jupiter, lord of thunder and empire, sitting high on Olympus, receiving prayers wrapped in pocket change. If lightning bolts could be powered by quadrantes, the sky would have glowed constantly. And yet, there is a curious side note here. Some shrines were so filled with small coins that they had to be raked like gardens. Priests pushed them into piles, scooping them up in baskets. Imagine the soft scraping sound, bronze against bronze, like dry leaves being swept across stone. But historians still argue over how the temple authorities used this flood of tiny offerings. Were they melted down and recast into new coins? Were they hoarded in vaults or spent directly on candles and oil? The record is unclear, and the debate goes on like an unanswered prayer. You linger near a little statue of Venus. Her lips are curved in a smile, and at her feet lies a shallow dish. Inside, children have left seashells, beads, and the very smallest bronzes. Offerings mixed with toys, the kind of gifts only children think to give. A breeze moves through the temple doorway, carrying with it the smell of night flowers blooming outside. You close your eyes. The scene feels strangely familiar, like tossing a coin into a fountain in your own world. That wish-filled clink, that tiny hope that the universe might listen. Someone kneels beside you, a young woman with rough hands, probably a washerwoman. She drops a single coin, one as humble as her clothes, and whispers a prayer. The coin is nothing, barely worth a crust of bread. But to her, it is a doorway to the divine. You realize then that in Rome, the small coin was more than money. It was a ritual, a way of talking to gods, to fate, to the mysterious. Large sums were impressive, but small coins were intimate, personal. The lamps flicker, the chanting quiets, and the temple slowly empties. Outside, the night air is cool. Stars emerge above the roofline, and a soft chorus of crickets begins. Your pocket is lighter now, your step slower. You hear the echo of those dropped coins still ringing in your mind, like tiny bells, like a lullaby for the gods. And so, with temples behind you and the night ahead, you drift further into the Roman world. The air tastes of incense, the stones beneath your feet still warm from the day, and every small bronze you touch feels more like a whispered prayer than a piece of money. The night deepens as you wander on. The narrow streets of Rome breathe with lantern light, each window a little star flickering against the dark. The paving stones glisten faintly, still holding the memory of the day's warmth, and the air smells of olives and wood smoke. You hear laughter in many tongues, foreign voices tangled with Latin. Merchants from distant lands have arrived. Their robes are cut differently, their accents thick, their purses heavy with silver. They step into Roman markets and find themselves baffled. Baffled not by the scale of the empire, but by the river of minuscule coins that everyone else seems to accept as natural. A Greek sailor pays for a cup of watered wine, and the vendor insists on a cascade of tiny bronzes. The sailor frowns, his hands searching in vain for larger change. He mutters something sharp in Greek, the kind of complaint that has probably been muttered for 2,000 years. Why so many coins for something so small? This is the historical fact. Many foreigners did indeed find Rome's obsession with low denominations strange. Other cultures preferred silver or larger denominations, but Rome had an enormous system built upon bronze, copper, and even tin. It was as if the empire itself believed that no detail of life was too small to count. A curious side note drifts to you in the night air. Some barbarians, visiting Rome, treated the tiny bronzes almost as trinkets, not money. Archaeologists still find Roman small change buried far outside the empire's borders, sometimes in graves, sometimes in hoards, as if the coins had been kept as keepsakes. Pretty curious, rather than currency. And historians still argue about the why. Were these foreigners mocking Roman habits, thinking the coins laughably unimportant? Or did they treasure them as exotic souvenirs, strange symbols of a world larger than their own? The truth is blurred, like the reflection of a lantern in rippling water. You imagine walking beside one of these strangers, a trader from Gaul perhaps. He carries Roman bronze coins with the same puzzled air that you might carry foreign bus tokens today. You both step past a fountain, the water glinting beneath the moon, and he shakes his head, muttering that a proper empire should deal in silver and gold, not pocket-sized coppers. And yet, as he grumbles, children dart past, laughing, clutching little handfuls of coins like they are treasures from the deep. For them, the tiny bronzes are not absurd. They are power, a sweet cake, a carved toy, a little doorway into joy. In that way, you see the truth. What seems strange to outsiders is woven tightly into the Roman fabric of life. Every cobbler, every washerwoman, every boy buying a fig feels the weight of those bronzes and understands their worth. The streets grow quieter. The foreign traders retire to their inns, still muttering about strange Roman habits. You continue wandering, the sound of crickets filling the spaces between your steps. Above you, the sky is velvet black, the Milky Way spilling like a silver river. And beneath it, in Rome's beating heart, the coins clink and jingle still, as if the city itself breathes in small change. You drift further, past the glow of torches, past the murmurs of strangers in a dozen languages. The coins in your own pouch feel softer now, more like pebbles, smoothed by a stream. Foreigners may puzzle over them, but to you, they are already part of the dream. The night feels longer now, as though time itself has slowed. The city breathes in softer rhythms. Lanterns are guttering low, casting shadows that tremble on stone walls. You wander still, and the coins in your pouch seem lighter, as if their story is beginning to drift away. For centuries, Rome adored its tiny coins. Every trade, every offering, every soldier's pay clinked and clattered with them. But empires grow and empires change. Slowly, almost invisibly, the little bronzes began to lose their place. Inflation crept like ivy on a wall. Prices rose, and what once could be bought for a single coin now demanded a handful, and then a fistful, and then a small sack. Merchants tired of counting. Soldiers tired of carrying wages that jingled but did not buy much. Ordinary Romans, once delighted by the power of a tiny copper piece, began to shrug at its weight, and so reforms came. Emperors, anxious to appear wise, began to issue larger coins, silver with more shine, bronze pieces of heavier value. The smallest coins lingered, but their dignity slowly faded. What was once precious now seemed almost pitiful. Children might still play with them, but adults preferred heavier sounds in their purses. A curious note slips in here like a breeze. Archaeologists notice that over time, the tiniest coins vanish more often from hoards. Perhaps people no longer saved them, or perhaps they were lost so easily that few survived. Some scholars even suggest they were swept away with rubbish, forgotten like crumbs brushed from a table. And still, historians argue. Did the empire abandon small change because inflation made it useless? Or was it a deliberate act, a way to simplify commerce in a sprawling, complicated world? The debate flickers like a candle flame, never fully steady. You imagine yourself watching the change unfold. A baker accepts a larger bronze coin and does not bother asking for the small pieces anymore. A soldier tucks silver into his belt and ignores the scattered copper at his feet. Even the temples seem quieter as offerings shift to larger coins, clinking less but gleaming more. Through it all, the city remains alive. The fountains still sing, the night air still smells of figs and smoke, the stars still hover overhead like watchful eyes. But beneath the familiar rhythms, something delicate has slipped away. The sound of endless tiny coins, That peculiar Roman obsession begins to fade into memory, yet you can almost hear it still. Like seashells echoing with old waves, Rome's stones seem to remember. Every alley where children once counted coins, every stall where a seller rattled a purse like a tambourine, every temple where an offering of humble bronze was laid down. They all whisper of small change. The empire marches on towards reforms, towards crises, towards centuries of transformation. But you, walking here in this softened night, carry the memory in your hand. You let the little coins fall slowly from your palm, one by one, into the quiet dark. They make no grand sound, just the faintest click, like the echo of time itself. And as they settle, you feel the story settle too. It was never really about coins. It was about the weight of small things, the tiny measures that shape vast lives, the quiet truths that hold empires together until, gently, they slip away. The night is utterly still now. The city slumbers, and even the crickets seem softer. A breeze moves through the trees like a sigh. You stand there, empty-handed, but somehow full. The night has grown hushed. The bustle of Roman streets has dissolved into silence, as though every stall and every home has folded its shutters and drifted into rest. You are left wandering in the dim glow of fading lanterns, your steps slowed, your breath even. The sound of coins has vanished, and in its absence you hear something else, the deep and timeless rhythm of calm. You pause beneath an archway, the stone cool against your shoulder. Above you, the stars look the same as they did 2,000 years ago. It is comforting to think that all the debates, all the quarrels about coinage, all the noise of market and mint have melted into the quiet of eternity. Only the night sky remains unchanged, patient and steady. You picture one of those tiny coins again. It rests on your palm, its surface worn smooth, its weight barely noticeable. So small, and yet once it was enough to buy bread, or to light a lamp, or to whisper a prayer at a temple altar. It is a reminder that history is not built only on grand battles or marble statues, but also on little tokens handled by countless ordinary lives. Your breathing grows slower, your shoulders ease. You are not in Rome anymore. You are in your room, wrapped in the gentle comfort of the present. But the story has carried you far, and you can still feel the faint shimmer of oil lamps, the warm dust of the Subura, the cool water of fountains murmuring in the dark. Even the scholars' arguments, those endless debates about inflation or reforms, feel like quiet ripples now. They do not demand an answer tonight. They are part of the lullaby of history, a gentle reminder that questions may remain unsolved, and that is perfectly fine. Some mysteries are better left as soft echoes. You sink deeper into stillness. The empire fades, the coins fade, and even the voices of the past drift into silence. What remains is only calm, stretching wide like the night sky. You may picture yourself placing that last tiny coin on the windowsill, leaving it for the moonlight to claim. The air is cool, the stars shimmer faintly, and time seems to stop its restless turning. It is a moment outside of worry, outside of weight, just you, your breath, and the gentle hush of the world. Allow yourself to close your eyes now. Feel the softness gather around you as though ancient linen cloaks and warm summer breezes have been woven into a blanket. Nothing presses upon you here. Nothing demands your attention. The story has been told, and the night is ready to carry you deeper. Rest. Let go. Drift quietly as the smallest coins of history scatter like stars across your dreams. Sweet dreams.